So how do you view the issue of homelessness in Missoula compared to a year ago?
I would say that this work is very iterative, and we are continuing to apply lessons that we're learning from the initiatives that we are undertaking, as well as other homeless service providers. And so the way I view the issue of homelessness from a year ago is that, of course, the issue is still with us. And we continue to work on both helping manage immediate situations that are in front of us today. So that includes implementing the ordinance that City Council passed, and then the larger policy and system work that we are doing, including the community-led strategy to address homelessness. So speaking about the first, the implementation of the ordinance required the administration, we had to take some time to get some things set up. For example, the vehicle parking program. We have north of 85 different permit holders in our community that are living successfully in their vehicle through the vehicle permit parking program that has been established through the ordinance. That's just shy of about 200 people. And those folks, certainly are working in the community. Those kids go to school. It's a whole host of different folks. And so the way I have been hearing about community's perception is that some of the conflicts that were challenging for the community for a challenge for the community over the last 2 years, we've seen some improvements. We've seen likely a greater amount of folks accessing shelter at the Pavarello Center. And so we're doing multiple things at the same time. Implementing the ordinance is really managing a particular situation right in front of us in terms of folks that are, what we consider street homelessness, and folks that are not accessing shelter. Then, of course, we have sheltering needs, and then, like I said, working on the larger strategy on our way home.
Okay, and I don't know, I emailed Ginny about it, but do you have the number of how many warnings, citations, and fines have been issued since the ordinance was implemented?
I can send you that number. I did reach out and have some information from our police department and from our city attorney's office, so we can follow up with that.
Okay, and looking ahead as you wind down Johnson Street, how many people have been housed through this housing sprint, and how much of that funding is still available? Yeah,
so for the Johnson Street housing sprint, we've raised about $200,000, and to date we have spent just a little less than $80,000. So I just received an update from our team who are working on that, and we have, the numbers are not right in front of me, but we have around 27 people that have accessed permanent housing. Some others have been reunited with family and friends. Others have obtained skilled nursing, for example, so other more appropriate housing-focused solutions that folks have been able to be connected with as a result of the efforts that we're making there. So, like I said, we've got 80,000 of the 200,000 spent, so less than 50%. Some people required $100, to help them with applications for rental homes. Others have required a lot more than that. For example, somebody had a restitution that they were dealing with related to a previous relationship, and that was following them around in such a way that that was the barrier to accessing housing. And so the key to this is having a flexible fund. The City of Missoula has partnered with the United Way and other community partners, the county, to have a flexible fund in our community, and that's called the Housing Solutions Fund. That is really the example we've used with Johnson Street and the Housing Sprint Fund, in the sense that we have a flexible fund to be able to help people pay off rent arrears or utility arrears, or help with a security deposit down payment, or like I just said, help with a situation that is a restitution that might have resulted from a previous domestic situation, and or civil infraction, something like that. We're able to help folks clear those hurdles, and then help people be able to be, and then they're able to successfully move on with different housing focused solutions. So right now, like I said, we've got, in addition to the work that we're doing with the Johnson Street Housing Sprint folks, which somewhere around 30 have been able to achieve permanent supportive housing options.
How many are there?
How many are there where?
At the Johnson Street that are going to need housing.
Well, currently there's a little less than 70 folks that are there, and so in terms of the ones that are going to need housing, I would say that probably everybody does if they live in shelter, and so we'll continue to work with those folks over the next several weeks as we get to the end of the period there. We continue to hold on-site meetings every week, twice a week, and we have organizations that have been showing up with us steadily, which has been extraordinarily helpful. And that ranges from Missoula Interfaith Collaborative's Housing Advocate Network, the Missoula Housing Authority, the Job Service, and then some of our other organizations that folks can access substance use treatment, things like that. So we continue to show up and be present for folks, and a lot. We are, since the time that we started this housing sprint in April, we can surmise that several people have found solutions on their own, one way or the other. And then we have heard from the Pavarello Center that more people are going to the Pavarello Center on Broadway, because they did have around 40 beds that they had room for more guests there. And then, like I said, we've been working with folks to find different housing solutions.
Okay. And then with winter approaching, I know you spoke at that memorial at the courthouse with people who passed away and everything. No one wants to see that. I don't want to see that. I know you don't want to see that. What are the plans with the Johnson Street shelter shutting down? Is the housing sprint, or is there anything else? Is there plans for another shelter, or?
Yeah. So the way the city has been coordinating with, the way our community has been coordinating in response to wintertime extreme weather conditions has been a program, or it's called Winter Shelter. And Winter Shelter has been an effort across a number of different organizations, including the city, to try to make sure that we are reaching the most vulnerable folks and make sure that people are able to access shelter on very cold, extreme nights. That is something that we'll continue to employ in our community. This last winter, when we needed some additional overnight beds, we had members of the faith community step forward and help participate on that. And so it will continue to need resources in terms of staffing and other supports to make that kind of program successful. And in fact, we just had a conversation a little bit ago about the ongoing planning effort across not only homeless service providers and other health agencies, but also our faith community to continue to develop a plan, because it absolutely is a need, and it is absolutely something that we're focused on.
Okay, and so do you think the Pavarello Center can meet Missoula's current homeless population's needs with the Johnson Street shelter shutting down?
Likely not, no. And that is something that we've all known. That's the Johnson Street shelter was originally stood up because both there were needs during the winter months, but then specifically during the pandemic, when there was a health mandate to reduce the number of people in congregate shelter. And then since that time, we have seen that number grow for a number of different reasons. And largely, over the last several years, as you've seen not only in Missoula but across the state of Montana and across much of the country, there's been a large conversation around how it is that we help manage ongoing street homelessness, people that are living on the streets and successfully camping. Ultimately, the solution to homelessness is housing, and the city of Missoula is focused on housing solutions and a housing solution approach under the philosophy of housing first. Our community has, as other service providers, have also adhered to that same philosophy. And now it's a matter of our actions following our words. And I'm not trying to say that, there's always a need, and there always will be a need for congregate shelter. And it provides a very needed resource for folks that may not be able to maintain their own housing or even live in group home settings, for example. But where attention goes, energy flows, and we are already seeing a concerted effort across a number of organizations talking about how we are continuously improving our systems here in Missoula to ultimately get people housed. And so I do not think that the Pavarello Center has enough shelter beds, because that's what we've seen in the data that we have, and that's why we continue to focus on other housing approach solutions. And for example, like the temporary safe outdoor space that Hope Rescue Mission works on, how do we make sure that we as a community can continue to see different programs like that maintain, because we've seen well over 50% of the folks that have resided at the temporary safe outdoor space obtain permanent housing, and ultimately that's what our goal is. The solution to homelessness is housing.
Okay, and so we saw this a lot we put a poll on Facebook, so this is from a viewer. What kind of cleanup and revitalization efforts can Johnson Street neighbors expect to see after the shelter's closure? Yeah,
so the City Council has already passed a resolution in 2023 that the warehouses at the North MRL Triangle are deconstructed by September of 2026. So we will be proceeding with carrying that out this fall.
Okay. And then tell me a little bit about this $100 million investment in the Riverfront Triangle.
So that is a private investment, and those are the Averill Hospitality Group has estimated that their private investment in the destination hotel that they intend to build will be approximately $100 million. The city of Missoula owns the property, and we have for 40 years. And it has basically been, for the last several decades, it's been a parking lot. We've seen a lot of different attempts at there being a project successfully built there. And so we're very excited about this project and this transaction because it's really straightforward. The city's role is that we're going to sell the property to the Averill Hospitality Group, and we are going to invest in infrastructure in that part of our downtown that severely lacks underground subsurface utilities. Those utilities are often very expensive for developers that want to be able to build more intensely, not just maybe one floor of something. So we're talking water, we're talking sewer, we're talking dry utilities, so that's going to be all your electric and other kinds of internet and those types of things, gas. And so the public benefit is significant. It's, again, the city's making a straightforward investment with our investing in infrastructure, and the economic development that will spur from that is not only the $100 million construction project, but then of course once that facility is operating, once utilities are brought across to the west of Orange, that's a game changer for that entire triangle. That triangle has been, the city only owns the Fox site. All of the other properties are owned by private parties. And folks have been waiting to see what happens on that Fox Triangle because it's sort of the anchor to that. Once utilities are brought over to that site and once infrastructure is over onto the west side of Orange, it's a game changer in the sense that it's going to be much more accessible and affordable for those projects to be able to access the necessary infrastructure to build out. The city already obtains a 50-foot swath along the river on the adjacent to the Riverfront Triangle. That is going to be a public trail, public access to the river. And then we've negotiated a terrace that will lead from the trail up the hill to Owen Street. So that is an abandoned right-of-way. And it's got quite a grade change. So it's going to be a really interesting design challenge, but one that we're all up for, creating a terraced space. It will be built and paid for by the city, but it will be managed by the Averill Hospitality, and it's very similar to Caras Park. The city owns Caras Park, but the Downtown Association and the Downtown Partnership, they manage it. So it's that same kind of contractual relationship. So for the $100 million investment that we're going to see happen at the Fox Triangle, the community will not only get public river access and a terrace, but then we'll also see significant contribution to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We have negotiated the sale price of the land of $4 million to flow into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then additionally, the Averill Hospitality Group has voluntarily put forward a project where 1% of their gross sales will also contribute to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And the program that they are voluntarily putting forward is 1% of gross sales, approximately $300,000 a year for 10 years or $3 million. At which point they'll evaluate alongside the community what the charitable need is. This is a program that they've put in place in Whitefish. It's been something that's been really successful to help fund efforts on the Whitefish Lake.
Are you talking about the resort tax over there? Or
I'm not.
Is different?
It's the resort tax is a property tax, and that's something that Whitefish has. We aren't able to employ that here in Missoula because the legislature has not made resort tax or tourism tax available to larger cities like Missoula. Although I will say, we have a number of residents that are very interested in the survey, the community-wide survey that we conducted in November of 2024. Over 70% of Missoula residents that responded said that they were in favor of a tourism-based tax in the city if it offset their property taxes. And we advocated for property tax reform across the board this last session. That tourism-based tax did not make it through the legislative session, but we'll keep working at things that help provide tax relief to our citizens. But what I was talking about earlier was a voluntary program, and it's basically a 1% fee on gross sales. So it's not the city imposing this or the state imposing it as in terms of a tax. It's actually the Averill Hospitality Group voluntarily putting this program forward. And we hope that this actually encourages other business owners to do the same, because this is an excellent way for folks to be able to give back to the community and be able to contribute to something that is a dire need, which is creating resources, capital, so we can create more affordable housing options.
Okay, and you mentioned all that work on the infrastructure, the trail and all that. Will that result in a tax increase?
There will be property taxes paid as a result, absolutely. So right now, the city owns that parking lot. So no taxes are flowing through. When we sell the property to the Averill Hospitality Group this calendar year, immediately even the vacant land will go back onto the tax rolls. So that's encouraging. And then certainly the intention of an urban renewal district and investing in infrastructure and causing economic development helps increase the tax base. And so absolutely we anticipate that, and we know it'll happen.
Okay. And So the Missoulian was reporting earlier today that 80% of the city's $4.4 million budget increase will go towards existing employee wages. Is this true? And what are they getting paid now?
Well, yes, that is true. And the last question is a whole range. What I included in the mayor's executive budget is a 3% cost of living increase for non-union employees. The city of Missoula has 16 unions, and so the cost of living and pay increases vary between different unions, but all generally around that same number. And so my budget of a 3.5% proposed tax increase largely goes to existing operations, and the vast majority of that is maintaining our skilled and capable staff.
Okay. So someone in our Facebook comments mentioned that affordable housing is a 3 to 4 year wait list. Is that true?
I think what they're referring to is the Missoula Housing Authority's Section 8 voucher waiting list. So the short answer is that is not true, because there is affordable housing of all sorts. So for example, Homeward is a nonprofit housing organization in Missoula that has 9 different properties in Missoula. They're managed by Tamarack Property Management. Section 8 is rental assistance, where somebody pays 1/3 of their income towards the rent, and then the voucher makes up the rest of that rent. The other examples are affordable housing where they're rent restricted. So they're targeted for people that are earning low and moderate wages, and the rent is less than market rate, but it's not subsidized in the sense that you pay 1/3 of your income. And so there are hundreds of units, like I'm describing, all around Missoula, and those wait lists are not 3 to 4 years. Depending on the size of the home and the location of the property that you're interested in, I always encourage people to reach out, get on those wait lists as soon as possible. However, if you are looking for a Section 8 rent subsidy where you are only paying 1/3 of your income and you have very limited income, for example, if you're a senior living on fixed income or somebody with a disability, living with Social Security disability, that Section 8 waiting list is long. However, the Housing Authority does pay attention to making sure that it's updated in ways that they can try to reduce that length as long as possible. I think 3 to 4 years might have been it's at its peak. It's a good question to ask the Housing Authority how long it is now, but it's a precious resource. It's a very precious resource and something that we need more of.
Okay. And then, does Missoula plan to expand the temporary safe outdoor space or add another space like that?
I think that's really all part of the question. I would direct you to, that we're all asking, I would direct you to the community-led strategy On Our Way Home. The city of Missoula helped our community partners by paying for that plan to get developed and served as sort of the administrator of it. So helped bring together a group of community folks that led that whole process. And that strategy is a follow-up after our previous Reaching Home strategy that was in place for 10 years. That strategy was 2012 to 2022, and that concluded. And then this next strategy has just rolled out. And part of that conversation is addressing a number of different various strategies, not only helping prevent people from getting into homelessness to begin with, but then what are the right kinds of sheltering and temporary housing solutions. Because emergency shelter, congregate shelter, is one type of way in which people can get off the streets. Temporary safe outdoor space is more of a temporary housing, temporary shelter type of situation. And then, of course, hopefully graduating people to permanent housing. That temporary safe outdoor space is currently funded through Missoula County and in partnership with the United Way and Hope Rescue Mission. And it really is a conversation around how those, what additional public resources will be available for that to continue on into the future. But I'm hopeful that community members will see the value of those. And I do think that there's opportunity to take a look at how it is that we can create more temporary safe outdoor space type projects for different groups of people. One of the folks that we're all keenly interested in making sure have resources and housing stability are folks that are post foster age kids, and youth that are engaged in the criminal justice system. It's very important that we help address and get these young people not only connected to employment and skills and the ability to maintain housing, and as we know, once you're out of the foster system, you pretty much don't have any resources, and that is troubling. We want to make sure that we try to address that sooner rather than later. So there's a consortium of people in our community that's addressing that, and possibly more temporary safe outdoor spaces might be the solution there.
Okay, when you talk to people about the price of rent and housing being so expensive and things like that, a lot of the times the thing that comes up is Airbnbs and things like that. Bozeman, I think a year or two ago, had some regulations on short-term rentals. Is there any plans to do something along those lines here in Missoula?
Yeah, we do regulate short-term rentals here and require their registration. So we also have tracked through our software the number of short-term rentals that are registered with us here in Missoula. In Missoula, about 1 to 1.5% of our housing stock is currently registered as a short-term rental. In other Montana communities, that number is larger. And so your first question is, how much of an issue are short-term rentals in terms of affordability? And I think that's really where we always have to come back to the data and trying to understand if short-term rentals are really impacting the general housing affordability. In Bozeman, it's 3 to 4%. The last number I looked at, Whitefish, it was much higher. Some of the other resort communities around Montana, the number is much higher. And in Missoula, the number is not as high. And so we're very careful to work with private property owners, folks that own short-term rentals, to make sure that we're doing so in such a way that is working for everyone. But that number is all available. All that information is available on the city's website in terms of us tracking short-term rentals, and then we do regulate them.